Let's find out. We are now joined by Universitas Airlangga International Relations expert, Mas Radityo Dharmaputra. Good morning, Mas Radityo. Thank you for joining us today. I believe we are unable to hear you. Maybe you're...
Oh, you can't?
Now you are. There you are.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get your take on it, Mas Radityo, on the two-day G20 summit and what is the global response so far from the summit?
I think mostly it's a successful summit. Indonesia, as you have shown in the previous section, managed to organize a very, magnificent gala dinner, for example. Not only that, Indonesia also managed to push forward a leaders' declaration, a feat that many people, many analysts, including myself, was very skeptical at the beginning. But it happens, and the leaders' declaration, even though we can debate with the final point of it, but it is already a success in a very turbulent world at the moment. But of course, there are some notes that we have to take into account. Even though we have a pandemic fund, we have a commitment to support the transition to green energy from the G7. But the event itself, the summit itself, was still overshadowed by what happened in Ukraine. So in the second day, for example, the mangrove planting session had to be delayed for 1.5 hours, for example, because the G7 members had this urgent meeting due to the missiles attack in Poland. So you see that there are some success, but we still have to take into account that it is still a world with war, food crisis happening as well.
Well, I think doesn't that contribute to, because you said it before, that you were skeptical that a communique or a declaration would be reached at the end. I mean, the conversation must have been once overshadowed and derailed so many times to stay focused. Isn't that a great achievement, though, for Indonesia to make sure that, look, whatever it is right now that is happening, let's get back to business? And how do you think the G20 will have a legacy on Indonesia and its leadership in the future?
Yes, it is a great moment for Indonesia. Being able to just agree on the leaders' declaration is a success in itself. It is also a chance to show Indonesia's position compared to other countries. So this is actually a moment where Indonesia can show to other countries, no, look, we belong here. We belong with you as part of the global leadership. I think President Jokowi already mentioned it before in his State of the Nation address, 17th of August. That Indonesia is at the pinnacle of global leadership. This is one way to show it. But now the question whether Indonesia can move forward. So not only organizing summit, not only creating leaders declaration, but then implementing and pushing big countries to actually do what they're committed here.
Right. Mas Radityo, Kai mentioned something earlier that is of interest, definitely, which was the pandemic fund, in which during the G20 summit, Mr. President announced that he would launch the pandemic fund and has raised $1.4 billion US. So how big of an impact is this fund to the world, and how can this actually help improve Indonesia's leadership in the world's view?
I think this would have an impact. Again, if it's only G20 and if it's only Indonesia, it would be, I would be very skeptical again. But because this is not only G20, this is actually part of a global effort, including the World Bank and the WHO, to create this pandemic fund. It will be under the World Bank and under the advisory of the WHO, so it should work. And it will show the world that at least, even though there is war going on, even though with food crisis, we can actually do something, and which is very practical, will be very beneficial, especially to the developing world.
I wanted to point out that because I felt like when I read the 52 paragraphs, yes, there are 52 paragraphs of the declaration, I found the highlights very interesting because one way Indonesia's managed to be a voice for the lower and mid-income countries that needed this fund to recover. So this just proves how much effort Indonesia has put into negotiating and really railing into these global parties to join in the movement, basically. So during the G20 presidency, as we know, Indonesia has organized around 437 events
Wow.
with one summit in 25 cities. How much positive impact in the future in increasing Indonesia's economic growth, especially in this post-pandemic period?
Yes, I think it should be. Hopefully, it will be good because again, with all the summit, with all the events in hundreds of cities, or in hundreds of events in 25 cities, there is the notion that it will be good for Indonesia's tourism at least. So you're bringing people from outside to see Indonesia. But now the challenge is how to continue doing that, because if we look at the previous events, let's say big events, the World Cup, Olympics, the problem is always after the events. So whether you can continue doing that, whether you can continue to attract people to visit Indonesia, because in comparison to other countries of Southeast Asia, for example in Thailand, we are still lagging behind in tourism. So we have to push forward, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense as well. Now, speaking of challenges, we are still facing a global recession next year. How did the G20 world leaders view this threat, and how did they react, and what were their reactions in regards to this upcoming global recession?
I think you can see that there are differences, very stark differences in some countries, especially from the West. So I remember the EU Commission put forward a strong notion that this recession, this financial recession, all the economic crisis is caused by the war in Ukraine. But then other countries will have different position. So if you look at the declaration, they have significant differences.
Yeah.
But I think what they agree on is that security issues affect economic situation, and they have to deal with the economic situation by, for example, G7 already committed to help bringing or building infrastructure for the next few years. 600 billion, I remember correctly, President Biden mentioned that. So you have some, especially the donor countries, the more the richer countries trying to help with the recession. But unfortunately, the cause of what happens now must be traced back to the Russia's war in Ukraine. So without dealing with that, there is a chance that it will be like skirting around the edges of the problems, trying to deal with the symptom, but not the causes.
Right.
So very interesting. So we know that there were a lot of important meetings that happened during the G20 on the sideline as well. In your opinion, was Indonesia successful with the G20 in bringing peace missions to several countries to prevent conflict? I mean, we've hosted meetings like Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping and other very big powers that have finally met up for the first time in a very long time.
I think it's a mixed bag, actually. So you have, on the one hand, we have Biden and Xi Jinping meeting for the first time in person. That is that's good news. It is a start of trying to understand each other, even though the current situation might be worsen in the next few years. But with the ongoing personal touch between Biden and Xi, Indonesia at least give the floor and give the chance for them to meet. But on the other hand, the idea to bring Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky to Ukraine did not materialize.
Yeah.
So that's also a problem. Putin did not attend, even virtually. Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, left early. Zelensky only gave a virtual speech. So on the one hand, it is successful in giving a chance for Biden and Xi to meet. But then somehow unsuccessfully trying to gather Putin and Zelensky under one roof. But that's already a very difficult job from the very beginning. So I'm not going to hold Indonesia and Jokowi to that.
Yeah, I think that was.
I would-
I don't think that was a target. That was
No.
that was going to be a bit of a stretch to begin with.
Yeah,
it would have
for
been
sure.
the best case
Yes.
scenario. But since you mentioned Xi Jinping, let's talk about what was happening on the sidelines there in regards to Indonesia and China. Yesterday was a historic moment for both nations as they were able to, albeit virtually, join the virtual test of the Jakarta-Bandung High-Speed Railway, or KCIC, Kereta Cepat Indonesia-China. So how do you see relations going forward between Indonesia and China in the future?
I think the relation will be good. It will be even better in the next few years. There are, of course, several challenges, including Indonesia's perception of China. China getting more assertive in Southeast Asia, the issue of Taiwan, of South China Sea. But in terms of economy, in terms of financial cooperation, I think it will get better. But the only problem will be whether China can actually grow at the same rate as before. So if China's economic situation worsen, then it might lower the financial investment, all the investment that they made into other countries, including Indonesia. So that's, I think, the only problem in an economic sense. Politically, there are several challenges, and the next few years, especially with the election coming up in 2024, that will also, I think, that would be a very interesting discussion. That would be an interesting issue, Indonesia-China relations on political terms in the next few years.
So my last question, just wrapping up on the G20, we've already handed over the presidency to India that will start officially on the 1st of December. And we've already seen that they've already launched a new logo, a new slogan that is One Sun, One World, One Earth, One Family, One Future. So it's very interesting. What's your hope in the G20 summit in India next year?
I think India will be hopefully will be a very good host. The rumors and the discussion around the leaders' declaration is that India is actually very proactive in pushing that as well. So if you look at the declaration, one of the terms is this is not the era of war. That was actually Narendra Modi's statement in June and July, and then in September, he always reiterated that. So India will have the chance, and it will be a challenge. Again, the war will still going on. Even we hope that it will end soon, but with the current situation, it will go on. The economic crisis then will continue. India have a great challenge to bring all the leaders, and hopefully they can manage as Indonesia managed to do, bringing all the leaders to India.
We certainly hope so, because the momentum has started and we need to keep this thing rolling no matter who has the chair of the G20. Anyway, Mas Radityo, thank you so much for your time to join us for this quick recap of the G20 summit, and hope to check in again with you soon.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you.